Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today ours is called Open Mic Night. Sorry, got some camera challenges there. Open Mic Night is typically the first Sunday of every single month, which then is your opportunity to then ask me questions. Now, if you would like to ask me a question for next month, then click on the link below. Now, as I said, it is typically the first Sunday of every month, but last week I had the weekend off for one of very few weekends I have away. And so this week is Open Mic Night, and we've only got a couple of questions. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time, if I can, going a little bit deeper into those questions. But typically we get half a dozen or so. So please make sure that you click on the links below. And subject to time, if a couple of you try to sneak in one in the meantime, I'll see if I can do my best to actually add to the questions tonight. So that said, who are our questions today? We got a couple of questions. So allow me to just go to the questions here. So we've got one from Fiora, one from Dan, and another one from Krishna. So I might start with the one from Fiora. So Fiora has asked a couple of questions that actually go a little bit deeper into her own personal situation. So let's give her a little bit of questions. So firstly, it is, thanks for the great info, Rob. I live in Byron Bay, about a 2-hour drive from the Combsley meetup, which is in Brisbane, for anyone who doesn't come to our Combsley meetups. I'm thinking as a first-time developer, perhaps that I'm considering either Gold Coast or Brisbane might be a better choice to find a development project such as a subdivision. She goes on to say, I'm wondering how much time is actually spent on the location. Can the online tools do most of the finding? And also, do you think that Queensland sales contracts are more favourable for buyers? And she goes into a little bit more detail there. So I might be, given that there's 3 or 4 questions within the one question, I might try to break it up a little bit just to try and help everybody out. So firstly, thinking, so she's in Byron Bay and or Ballina, so I guess just on the southern side of the New South Wales border, and trying to consider where she might actually start to look at. So firstly, I'm going to say most of the things that you want to start to be considering will be not just population, but population growth rates. So when you're starting to look at your areas, there is going to be development opportunities that sit everywhere, okay? But it doesn't matter how well you identify the site. It doesn't matter how well you identify all the issues on the site. It doesn't matter how well you identify how much those issues are going to cost, how well you put that into your feasibility, how well you run your budget. It doesn't matter how perfectly you get your project to the dollar accurate on your feasibility. What matters most is, can you sell the finished product? Okay, because if you can't sell the finished product, then you'll never, ever get paid. So in looking at some of the areas that you're thinking of Ballina and or Byron Bay being close to where you live, which is always, ideally, you will always want to try and be somewhere near where you live. But you need to be considerate or conscious of the fact that the population growth rates might not be appropriate. So then where might be somewhere that is? So let's give you just a very basic Google search that you can actually do for yourself. So you want to do not only the population growth, but you also want to be the population growth rate, and insert the name of your council, okay? So I have done a very basic search and done what is the population growth rate of Byron. And what it's telling me is Byron has a population in 2021 of 9,840 people with a population growth rate of 1.23%. Now, what that is telling me, firstly, I'm going to round that to 10,000 just for easy math, with a population growth rate of about 1%. That's telling me that there's only going to be about 15 people grow in that area in any one particular year. Now, that's 15 people to then buy your finished product. And if someone else builds a finished product, now you're competing for those very, very few people wanting to pick up that property. Now, it doesn't mean that people won't buy it. It just means that if you get the product wrong, you've got no room for error. You've got no room for someone to be flexible in actually trying to take that on. So I did a very similar search and did population growth rate of Ballina. Now, Ballina has a population of 46,172 with a growth rate of 1.32%. So that's about 46 people per year. 460 people per year, I should say. That is actually going to grow. So better, but nowhere near as big. Now let's compare that to where you suggested, which would be Gold Coast. So the exact same search population growth rate of Gold Coast, and it's come up with 711,000 people with a growth rate of 1.72%, which is close to 980 people per year. Now, all of that is really super important when you start to compare how many people are actually moving into those areas. They're the potential people that are actually going to buy your finished product. Now, once you've done that very, 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 very basic search, you're then going to do one extra calculation, which is divide that by 2.6. Now, when you divide by 2.6, that is the average number of people who live in a household. So if there are 900, I'm just going to bring up a calculator, 980 people divided by 2.6 people in a household, that means there's 376 households that will actually need. So that's 376 dwellings of some description. So clearly when you do that, do the same search for Brisbane, etc. What you're going to find is, look, the opportunity, the actual growth rate is clearly where there is larger population growth. Now, that's a very basic search. That would not be the only search that I would actually do, but that's giving you some insights to say, hey, perhaps the area that I'm living in might not be ideal to do lots of development. You might be able to get away with one as an example, but I would be trying to go, well, where can I get the most opportunity with the least amount of risk? Because if I get, as I said before, if I get my product wrong, then where there's only, I guess, 100 people that are moving into an area, then you get it slightly wrong, and there's only 2 or 3 people that might be interested in actually what you're going to pick up. If you're going into an area where there's 1,000 people, then if you get it wrong, maybe there's 100 people that might still be interested because, look, they want to live in the area, but the product isn't perfect, but it's good enough. But if you hit the mark, if you get it absolutely categorically perfect, absolutely it can work. But do you want that level of risk? So that's part one of your question. Let's see if I can then go back to your question and see what part two was it. Do you think the Queensland sales contracts are more favourable to buyers, for example, having a 14-day due diligence period? So firstly, I would say, and the reason why, Fiora, you're asking that is because you're living on the cusp of 2 states, and so you could get 2 different variations of contract. So north of the border, you could have the REIQ contract, south of the border, the REI-NSW contract, and they are slightly different, and the legislation that sits behind them is slightly different. I'm going to say both of them are favourable. You just need to know how each one works and what the issues and challenges that are sitting in them. Now, you asked specifically about a 14-day due diligence period. That is in neither contract. What that is you negotiating that into the contract. Now, you can negotiate that on either side of the border. So that isn't really a problem. But typically, you're going to find that in Queensland, it's a little bit more because the contract is signed subject to due diligence, subject to building and pest inspections and subject to finance inspections and those sorts of things. Typical, adding one extra clause in doesn't appear to be that big a hassle in order to do, because if it's going to take you 14 days to get your finance sorted, then you've got 14 days where it's going to be, I guess, a conditional contract anyway. So having a due diligence clause for the same 14 days doesn't typically tend to be something that's very difficult to actually ask. But that said, plenty of people put due diligence clauses into the New South Wales contracts as well. Our community is doing that all day, every day. It's just about asking and making sure that the vendor on the other side is understanding why you need that, and why that will allow you to potentially pay a higher price point than someone who is not going to develop their property. So they need a little bit of patience to actually help you to understand. So that's part 2 of your question. And now there was also a third part to the question. Let me see if I can try and pull that apart. Yes. How much time is actually spent on location, on finding the right location? That's probably, I guess, a bigger question that you might actually think. Most people tend to look at this the wrong way around. Most people choose the location and then force what they want to do into the location to see whether or not they can actually do it. So, for example, choose Byron Bay and then try to force whether or not a subdivision will work there. That might work, but the problem is that what you're trying to do tends to determine where it's going to happen. For example, where you want to do a subdivision and where you want to do townhouses will be completely different locations. And so what you want to do is choose what you want to do, and on top of that, what deal size you want to do. So it's not just that you want to do a subdivision, but you want to do a 1 into 2 or a 1 into 20. Okay. So once you know what your deal size is and your deal type is, that determines where you're going to start to do that. And your suburb selection process and your council selection process is an integral part of that. The reason is what you're looking for, what you're trying to do is you're trying to prove, firstly, is there population going into that area? Okay. In order to do that, there's a lot of things that we start to look at. Where is state government starting to push our population? Okay. State government knows that there is, I guess, anywhere from 300 to 400,000 people per year that population growth rate that need a home. And so what they're trying to do is herd all the people into particular areas where it's more cost effective and more efficient for them to build new roads, new hospitals, schools, all those sorts of things. So they tend to push people into very particular areas. That then determines which council the population is likely to land in. So you then start to read those council strategic plans and start to go, right, is this council ready to receive this population? And if it is, where within the council do they actually want to see that? And there's a whole bunch of elements and tricks as to how councils actually cater for that. But again, councils have to deliver local services. They have to do your sewerage network and stormwater network, and they have to do libraries and parks and things like that. So they're trying to work out what is the most efficient way to actually build within their own particular council. That then determines, okay, which particular suburbs are going to have the most amount of opportunities for the thing that you want to do. So you read that particular council's rules and understand that, hey, for this particular deal size, I'm going to need X amount of square meters of land, and it's got to be zoned in a particular way. As an example, if you're doing it in New South Wales, it might be an R2, somewhere between 800 and 1200, for example, might be a 1 into 2 subdivision. Anything above 1200 might be a 1 into 3 subdivision. Now, I've just kind of made those numbers up, so please don't quote me on that for your particular council, because it will vary from council to council. But what you're then starting to do is to say, well, how many opportunities actually sit in that particular suburb based on the parameters that we just looked up within the council rules. And you'll find some suburbs have lots of opportunities and some suburbs have no opportunities. So that takes time to actually articulate that. Once we find how many opportunities there, we're then going to start to look at how many of those opportunities people are actually starting to do developments on. You see, we don't want to be the first developer to actually do a development of that type in the area. So we want to look for evidence that other people have actually done it. And so that's where the sales research tools start to come in. Now, my tool of choice is National Property Data. Clearly, I have a vested interest in that, being a director of National Property Data and I guess an influencer of the technologies that we actually sit behind the scenes in that. So I know it's the tool that I wanted when I was going through my development journey. And so we are building that in such a way to allow you to do very, very creative searches that will actually find exactly what you're actually looking for. Now, once you can see that, you start to pull out the sales history and look at what is the typical sale price of the raw land, as in before it's developed. And then you're going to start to do searches for the finished product. How many people have actually done what I want to do? And I can see the finished product. So if I know what it was raw and I know what it is cooked, finished, then what I can then do is do the math that actually sits between them. Now, we call that the suburb selection process. To actually do that, we then plug that into a tool called the Rough Cut FISO. That is all within my property development formula program. And for anyone actually interested in that, I might just do a very quick link for anyone who's interested in their property development formula program. So you can actually have a look at that. Once you then do those research elements, that is going to give you a red light, green light type opportunity. Now, that red light, green light is going to tell you, okay, what is the likelihood that I can buy on average, run the average deal, and sell on average, and still actually make a profit in the area. Now, if you can do that and get a green light, and there's lots of opportunity in the area, that then starts to become the area you want to start to farm. Now, that takes time, okay? Now, typically, depending upon how much effort you actually put into the process, but that could take you anywhere from 3 to 6 months to actually find an area that is actually got lots of opportunity, evidence that someone's done it before you, and proof that those people have actually been profitable. Now, if you can do those things, what you'll find is that the area that you're in has lots of opportunity, and you don't have to be banging your head up against a wall for a very long time trying to buy under market price and get very specific terms. You don't have to be very lucky in order to make it work. Instead, you can just go in and, like everybody else, just buy at market price. Now, obviously, if you can get better than market price, you're even better in front. If you can, I guess, get really great negotiated terms, that's great. But by having lots and lots of opportunities, it means that you don't have to compete with other people. So when somebody else comes in and starts haggling on a property and they start to get emotionally invested and they start pushing the price up, it means that you can just step away, let them win that particular battle, and you'll take on the next battle because there's another one just around the corner. You see, on average, every property in Australia turns over every 10 years. So if you've got 200 opportunities that are sitting in the area that meets your land size and your zoning type, then on average, there'd be approximately 20 of those that are going to come up every one year. But so lots of people are going to be fighting for those. But if there's 2,000 opportunities in an area, then 10% of that would be 200 opportunities. And so more of those properties are going to come up over and over and over. And so there'll be less people competing for them. And that's the beauty about going through the process. So how long does that take? Somewhere between 3 and 6 months, typically, to actually get yourself locked into the area that is going to be highly profitable with lots of opportunities. So hoping all of that, Fiora, helps you in actually pushing your process forward. Next question comes from Dan Burns. So Dan says, "Hi Rob, I'm finding suburbs that have to that seem to stack up, but for some limited development options, e.g., subdivide and keep the house and sell as land. However, they don't stack up for other options, e.g., demolish, subdivide, sell land, etc. Because of these limited options, I am not looking any further into these suburbs. By doing this, I'm also potentially passing up good opportunities, ? So let me give you some insights into what Dan is actually talking about there. So what he's saying is, look, he's seeing lots of evidence of deals that actually make sense, but they only make sense in executing a lot of different ways. You see, even a very basic 1:2 subdivision, there are many, many, many ways to exit that deal. So firstly, you could knock the house down and sell 2 vacant blocks of land. You might be able to keep the house if it's perfectly positioned on the block, keep the existing house, sell that in its existing state, but on a smaller block of land, and sell 1 block of land. You might be able to keep the existing house on the small block and build a brand new home. You might be able to knock the house down and build 2 brand new homes. You might keep the existing house, but do a renovation on it and then actually sell that. So there's lots of different permutations. So what he's saying is, look, in all of his different examinations, the permutations that actually make sense in that particular suburb, there are actually very few opportunities. So he can keep the house and sell the land. So which means that he has to find a house that is perfectly located. Now, what you'll find typically is that most people, when they've got a oversized block, they'll stick the house exactly in the middle of the block. And so if you're wanting to subdivide and put a line right down the middle, then typically that house is going to be in the way. So unless your houses in the area are relocatable, so pick them up because they're on stumps and slide them across, or the size of the land is such that you could actually do a battle axe, keep the house where it is and put a driveway down the side, then a lot of those times those houses are actually going to get in the way, which means that whilst on paper there looks like opportunities, when you actually put a lot of effort into analyzing the individual opportunities, you'll find many of those opportunities exclude themselves because the house is poorly located. So Dan, I think you're onto the right thing there. What you're saying is, look, the number of opportunities is limited. The number of exit strategies is limited. So this, I would actually say, would be a B grade suburb. Now, B grade suburb means, look, I've done the work. I know that for the right opportunity, it's actually going to be profitable, but it's not going to be for every opportunity. And because of that, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time actually farming the area, because I'm going to get more disappointed because most of the sites are going to have that limitation in how I actually exit the deal. Instead, being a B grade suburb, I would set all of my alerts on realestate.com and Domain and I guess the like. Make sure that those alerts are actually coming through. The Homely is the other real estate portal that is actually getting pretty close to actually overtaking Domain as portal number 2. So keep an eye on that one, folks. Homely, if you've not come across that one before. But getting those alerts means that you can still look at the opportunities on their own particular merits, but you're not going to spend lots of time door knocking. You're not going to spend lots of time sending letters out, all those sorts of things, because as you said, it could actually be, I guess, causing a great deal of heartache. Instead, what I would actually be doing is trying to find other areas as an A-grade suburb where the same number of opportunities exist, but the number of permutations on the exit strategies give you a lot more flexibility in actually going through the process. So hope that helps, Dan. Now, looking at time, folks, if any of you have an extra question and want to fire it through, there is an outside chance that I might actually have a little bit of extra time. So click on that link below, propdev.info/open mic. And if you can fire a question through to there, if it arrives in time for the end of the session, I will do my best to actually answer it. And I'm just going to make sure, having said that I'm actually monitoring my questions as they come through. See if I can bring up my email just to make sure that's actually going to happen. Next question comes from Krishna. So Krishna's got a question. He says, does real estate wholesaling work in Australia? Now, Krishna, you're clearly, I'm going to guess, from the UK, so using slightly different terminology. But he then goes on to say what real estate wholesaling is. Okay, so I'm sure you would know, but just so we're on the same page, getting a discounted property under contract, then subsequently selling that contract to a developer for a fee of around 1 to 20K. Okay. So what he's talking about is actually getting a finder's fee for the process. Okay. I'm 18 years of age and heard about this concept online, thought it was a good way to collect money for my first property in my portfolio. If yes, what would be the most practical and realistic way to get started? Krishna, that is a fantastic, I guess, question, mate. And the fact that you're 18 and asking those questions and actually getting involved, kudos to you, mate. So I was actually 18 when I started my property career. I bought my first house at 18, first investment property at 21. So the fact that you're starting right now is going to set you up for success a long way into the future. The one thing that I would say, mate, is you've got time on your hands. So you don't need to be in a rush, okay? So great place to start and learn. So well done, mate. Now, let's talk about it. Now, there's actually 7 different ways to do low or no money down deals where you can profit from the property development process without ever owning the property, mate. And that is by controlling the property. One of the things is what you're talking about here, which is, I guess, a thing called deal finding in Australia. So what we will do is actually flick the site on for a finder's fee. So what you're going to be doing is doing all the research to prove that it's developable, all the research to prove that it's profitable, start negotiations with the vendor and actually determine the terms under which they would actually be wanting to sell that property. So what is the price point? What is the timeline? How much due diligence? All those sorts of things. And then trying to find an ultimate buyer to actually take that off your hands. You see, we've got almost 17,000 people. I'm going to say in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be announcing that we're hit 17,000 people in our community that are looking for deals all day, every day. And time is the most valuable commodity in order to find those deals. So people will pay the finder's fee in order for you to cut the amount of work out, because the finding of the deal is actually one of the hardest parts, and goes back to Fiora's question, how much time do we actually spend on the location? If it's going to take you upwards of 6 months to find the location. Then from there, you can then start farming the location. It can take you quite some time to find a deal. So when someone like yourself, Krishna, shortcuts that process and says, hey, I've found a cracking deal that's going to be profitable, they will pay a premium for that. Now, typically, depending upon the deal and how you've actually acquired it, that is in the vicinity of 2% of the purchase price of the property. So if it's $1 million property, it's about $20,000 in order to do that. So you're on the money with regards to what that finder's fee is. But what I would say is there's actually no cap, there's no ceiling on the amount of money you can actually make. Because if it's an absolute cracking deal that's going to make an insane amount of money, then you have the ability to potentially lift the asking price of your finder's fee and still leave plenty of money on the table for the next guy. Okay. Now that 2% that I was talking about is more the typical, the norm, what everyone is actually used to. But there's lots of other ways that you can actually do that. Now, there is a website that you can actually do to trade that. Now, I haven't got the link just yet, but if you give me 2 secs, I'll actually create the link. It's called Development Sites Australia. And I'm going to just look that up and give it to you now. Okay, so this is it here. Development Sites Australia is development.site. Now, developments, there it is there, development.site. Now, Development Sites Australia is a marketplace for trading those exact opportunities. So you, as a finder, will go and research and find the deal, and you can post that on Development Sites Australia for no cost to you at all. And there's approximately 17,000 people in our community that can then go looking for opportunities on there. And to search for the opportunity costs nothing, but to acquire the opportunity, they would pay the finder's fee. And Development Sites Australia will be, I guess, the buyer's agent representing the buyer to actually transact on that deal for you. So know that actually exists, that you can actually do that. Now, in that instance, I guess the finder's fee is actually shared between yourself and Development Sites Australia. So know that is an opportunity that you could actually use. So I will leave that link up there for a couple of moments before flicking back. But as I said, mate, that is not the only way to profit. That's one of 7 different ways. 7, that's number 1. So there is also, you might be able to do a joint venture with the landowner, never purchase the property in the first place, okay? You might do a delayed settlement with early access, which means that you might have, if you've got enough, time in the process, you might be able to completely run the project, get all the way through to the end, and have sold the finished product before you have to actually pay for the original product in the first place. There's project management, there's, I guess, options agreements, there's doing a DA and a flick. There's all sorts of things that you can actually do in order to profit from that. So I've got other Sunday sessions covering all of those topics, mate. So make sure you actually go and look at that. Now, that said, there are, I guess, a ton of extra information on every single one of those low and no money down deals. But the key is that you want to control the property, mate. That is the key. So if you don't have cash to purchase, then you want to control. And if you control, that means you're not buying. And if you're not buying, that means you don't necessarily need the cash. And so when you actually understand that, the key is, how do I actually understand the vendor's needs? What does the vendor actually want in order to transact, in order to get the deal to actually happen? You see, when we go in and typically try to buy a property, we are typically dealing with a real estate agent, and the real estate agent, their motive is to sell the property as quick as humanly possible so they get their commission check. And so most of the time they're saying, look, the vendors really want short, sharp settlement times. They don't want any mucking around. They just want to get in and out. Now, that's not necessarily what the vendor wants. That's typically what the real estate agent wants in order to get their commission. The vendor might be in a completely different situation. You see, as an example, the vendor, this might be their only place, the only time that they actually get to sell their principal place of residence, which means that they want to maximize the cash-free threshold that they get from the government when they're selling that. So no capital gains tax when selling your principal place of residence, but they may not yet have found where it is that they're going to. So they might want certainty of the sale and flexibility of the time. Now, if that's the case, there's a whole bunch of things that might allow you to actually do that. But you've got a real estate agent that's sitting in the middle. So what you've got to negotiate with the real estate agent is say, well, if we can make sure that you get your commission early, does it really matter if it's a quick sale or a long sale? If I can pay a little bit more for the premium for the property, then you're going to get a slightly higher commission check, and we're going to release that early. But we need the settlement terms to be very, very extended. Now, how do you pay more for a property and still be profitable? That's the key, right? So understand that there are two levers, time and risk. Both of those levers allow you to pay a little bit more for the property and still walk away just as profitable in the process. Now, let's look at time as a perfect example. Time is very, very measurable. Okay, so if you give me 12 months worth of time, I know that in 12 months, if I haven't owned it for that time, but if I've instead control that property for that time, in that time, I've not paid 12 months worth of interest. I've not paid 12 months of land tax. I've not paid 12 months of rates. I've not paid 12 months of any other holding costs that might actually sit there. So those costs, if I had have purchased the property up front, those costs would have gone to the Office of State Revenue. They would have gone to the Commonwealth Bank. They would have gone to the council, all the sorts of things like that. So they would have been a direct cost to the project. Why don't I instead repurpose those and say, look, Mr. Vendor or Mrs. Vendor, if you are patient, if you can wait the time, I could give you that cash rather than giving it to the Office of State Revenue, rather than giving it to council, rather than giving it to Commonwealth Bank. I'll give it to you, but I just want to give it to you at the end. So that improves your cash flow, okay? It also means that the vendor knows certainty of what their sale is actually going to be. They know exactly what their price is going to be, and they've got 12 months, the time that they were actually looking for. So you actually ascertained what their need was and able to offer a solution that met their need. Now, those sorts of win-wins are what you want to try and negotiate in the process, Krishna. If you can do that, if you can actually identify what that person's need is, you can make all sorts of creative scenarios. For example, what happens if the person doesn't know where they want to live, but they know exactly what that product starts to look like, and they want to stay in the area? And the site has the potential to create that exact product. So, for example, it might be a duplex or it might be a subdivision and build a brand new home. What happens if they want to, age in place, have their next property in the same area that all their friends and family are, in the same area where their community is, potentially even at the same physical address? What happens if you could do that and build that house in such a way that it's going to be low maintenance, it's not going to have stairs, it's going to have wider doorways for when they need their walking frame to walk through, all those sorts of things? What happens if you say to them, what if I built you the finished product exactly where you live today? Would that be something of interest to you? Now, basically, you've found the sale of the finished product without having to purchase the property in the first place, which means that, hey, what if I don't buy it off you? What if I don't pay stamp duty to buy it off you, and then don't sell agent's commission to sell it back to you, and you don't pay stamp duty to buy it back? So now all of a sudden there's all these extra savings, extra profitability in the deal, and you can say to them, why don't we just leave it in your name, and I'll only buy half the property off you at the tail end of the process, not all of the property. And in exchange for that half, it will be the cost of constructing that brand new dwelling for you. So they're just some examples, Krishna. You want to actually understand and get to know that vendor and what they're looking for and exactly how that's actually going to work, to know that that is going to come through. Okay, that's it, folks. I kind of did the reach out to see if anyone else wanted to ask any more questions, and nobody did. So given that's the case, if you want to go back for next month, it's typically the first Sunday of every month for Open Mic Night. Click on the link below, propdev.info/open mic. And what I will do is, collate research and prepare those questions and then answer directly to you. So we do that every single month and try and get you progressing forward on your development journey. Now, that said, we are coming into Christmas and we're going to have a whole bunch of Christmas festivities at our meetups over the next month or so. And we're looking at expanding into more jurisdictions in the not too distant future. If you want to come to one of our events, we currently run them in Brisbane, in Sydney, and in Melbourne, and soon to be expanding. So click on the link below, developernetwork.com/events, and you can actually come to one of our future events. That said, folks, that looks like no more questions. So I'm going to say thank you all for your time. It's been fantastic. And I will see you next Saturday or at our next upcoming meetup. Till then, bye for now. Bye.